Happy, what day of the week is it? Tuesday night, everybody. Susie McMahon with our virtual book club tonight, our meeting with our esteemed guests. I have two. Things come better in packages of two. And tonight, you guys, we are going to talk to both Dana Ridenour about Behind the Mask and Melissa St. Clair about Homework, a collection of poems. And I am so excited to have the two of you here. Welcome back to the virtual book club with my name stamped on it. I just wanted to tell you both it's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for your time. We all have noticed that now that a lot of us can be in person at events, that it's sometimes challenging to get people back virtually, but we're going to keep plowing through because we always have so much fun. I'm going to start tonight. I just wanted to say, well, you guys can both say hello. How about that? Let's interact. Dan, just say hello to the group, and then Melissa follow, and then I'll start asking the questions. Go ahead, Dan.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad that you've joined us this evening, and I'm happy to be here. I'm really happy to be here with Melissa, and this is going to be fun. Just shoot away. Ask anything you like.
Right hey, Melissa St. Clair. So glad to be here and as a double wing woman tonight. So it's awesome.
I know. I just want to thank you again so much, Melissa, for filling in for me last month. I really appreciate it. So just to go back in time a little bit, we met Dana a while ago, but I'm just going to read your bio from the back of your book, if I may,
Sure.
Just to make sure I reintroduce you to everyone. Dana Ridenour is a retired FBI agent. She spent most of her career as an FBI undercover operative, infiltrating criminal organizations, including the Animal Liberation Front, an organization of domestic terrorists. An award-winning author, Dana lives in Murrells Inlet, South Carolina, with her amazing husband. And this was your first novel, but you've had several since. Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Thank you.
Dan, I'm going to jump right in, if I could, into some of the questions that were sent from our book club members. And the first one, I just read off the back of your book, so I know the answer, but maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more. Is the Animal Liberation Front piece from your own experience as an FBI agent, or where did the basis for the story come from?
It is. It's from my first long-term deep undercover case was working with the extremist groups, and part of that was the Animal Liberation Front. So like Lexi in the book, it was kind of my first big undercover case too. So, and when I worked it, I was under 24/7, which means exactly that. You don't come out of your alias for any reason. So I was under 24/7, and I lived the part. I had undercover apartment, undercover driver's license, passport, everything like that. So that book, the first book, was directly from a case that I worked. I fictionalized it, but it was based on one of my cases.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. I think you had said this previously when we met, and you mentioned something about how FBI roles are too Hollywoodized. So what we kind of think, maybe me as a layman, is a lot more different than the actuality. Did you say something about that in the past, that you wanted to kind of make it more real life in your novels?
I did. That was one of the main reasons that I wrote the books, because books and Hollywood and television, they never get it right. So I wanted to write a book that was true to the FBI. I still wanted it to be exciting, but I wanted to keep it as true to life and life experiences as I could, without getting in trouble with the FBI, of course. But yeah, I wanted to write a realistic FBI book and show the psychological toll that working a deep cover case has on the agent. So that's what I set out to do.
And do you keep that same kind of theme going on in the other two? The other
Yes,
two books?
it's the same FBI character. I started out, with Behind the Mask as being a standalone book, and then I was kind of couldn't say goodbye to Lexi, so she's my FBI agent in my second book, and then I was addicted to writing, so she's the FBI agent in my third book. So it has become a series, and she's grown and matured some through the course of the books. She's gained experience, so she's a little different character with each book. Because I always said in real life, when you work in undercover, you gain a little bit of something and then you lose a little bit of something from every case. Your personality changes, and there's no getting around it when you're working undercover. So that, of course, happened to me in real life, and that's happening to Lexi in the books, because the books are they came right out of my journals. I was keeping journals when I was working undercover. I kept them hidden, of course, but that's where the books, the thoughts and feelings and emotions have come from my journals. So that's where Lexi comes from.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Now, Shoshana Williams Conway is watching from the Dallas area, and she sent in some of these questions. The other question I wanted to get in real quick before I jump over to Melissa for some questions is, since you shared with us, or we noticed on Facebook, that your FBI team in real life responded to post 9/11 at the World Trade Center, do you believe that you might write about that in one of your future novels?
Well, that was that part of my career means a lot to me. I was very proud to be an FBI agent. The response I thought that we did when the terrorist attack happened, I thought the Bureau did a fantastic job of jumping in and doing what needed to be done. I will say it's still a little bit hard for me to talk about, and I've been back to New York several times, but I've yet to go to the World Trade Center site. I think maybe I could do it now, but the last time I was there was a couple of years ago, and I still couldn't do it. I couldn't go back and see the site. I really doubt that I will write anything about 9/11. I kind of like Lexi in the present, and I really don't want to go back and write about the past. But I'm not going to say never. I'll never say never, because I do have an idea for another FBI series that I'd like to write. And there might be an opportunity for that character to, flash back to something, because she is going to probably be an overt FBI agent. She's not going to be working in the undercover world, which means she will probably be on the evidence response team. So I'll never say never, because that could very well be something that shapes my character for my next books.
Well, I just want to thank you for your service at that time. I know that all of us over the weekend go back to our own personal stories and experiences and reflect on that. So thank you so much for the work that you did at that time. And yeah, we all have our emotions around that for sure. So everybody, we are got a twofer tonight. So we have Melissa St. Clair and Dana tonight. And then we do have a surprise guest planning to join us if he gets back from his in-person book club in time. So I just want to let everybody know that. And Melissa, we have a good gathering of ladies watching right now. And I wanted you to go back in time and explain to us what caused your motivation for creating your booklet of homework, a collection of poems.
Well, thanks for asking, and it's awesome to be here to share some of that. The catalyst for the work that I'm doing was definitely the murder of George Floyd. Feeling helpless and compelled to do something from that atrocity. I was introduced to Lynn Maureen Hurdle Price, who is a conflict resolution strategist, who was offering a course on the matter of race. And I started a 6-month program, and that sounds like a mighty long time, but it went in the snap. And now I'm in level 2, another 6-month program, but she has been educating us, the group that I'm in, about race and racism. And I didn't know what I didn't know, for sure. And so coming from that, the homework assignments, poetry was an unexpected processing mechanism for really, you know, what I'm sitting with and how to get through those thoughts and get to the next lesson.
And how have you been sharing your work with people? I know that you shared here, but what else are you doing to share this this booklet? I think I've seen you do things out in public. What all? Tell us how you're getting the word.
Yes, so another outlet, seemingly unexpected, is open mic. So I've been taking my work from the book and then work that's been coming up since this issue of the book to open mic. No poetry slams yet to get into a competition, but really just to share my work with the audience as food for thought. So.
And speaking of that, would it be okay if you read to us one of your poems?
I would be happy to. Okay. So the one that I am going to read is to Harriet Tubman and Robert Smalls. You ran for your freedom with everything to lose. While I can't spend a day walking in your shoes, I hear your footfalls on the streets. I follow your footsteps in unity and peace. Racism to trample. Thank you for your bravery and for leading by example. And that was written in Beaufort, where Robert Smalls lived and Harriet Tubman lived for a period of time as well. So.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Do you see yourself having another booklet coming out?
It's quite possible because they're still churning out and I need, you know, some place to put them. So there very well may be a volume 2.
Awesome. Awesome. So Dana, speaking of future works, can you, the piece that I think I shared in the group, what I loved towards the end of Behind the Mask was how you introduced the Low Country. And I felt a little bit of, I'm getting little chills because I'm sitting here on Frith Island right now, but I really liked the way that you introduced the area. And can you kind of give us a segue into what happens next and beyond the cabin with Lexi?
Oh, sure. I love the Low Country. And I guess I wrote the first book. Everybody always asks, well, why did you write the books? I think I wrote the first book for therapy. I'd spent a lot of time, almost 13 years in the undercover program doing various kinds of undercover. So I think Behind the Mask was therapy for me, getting it all down, getting it out, getting a lot of the stuff that had been bottled up for so long. Now, Beyond the Cabin was my love story to the Low Country. I love the Low Country. When I wrote Behind the Mask, I did live in Murrells Inlet. I now live in Beaufort, and I think Beaufort is probably the most beautiful place in the world, but maybe I'm a little partial. But when I was growing up, when I was young, a young teen and a young adult, I worked on a boat in Georgetown County, out of Georgetown, actually, South Carolina. And I worked for a captain. His name was Captain Sandy Vermont. And he taught me all about the Low Country. He taught me the history, the mystery, and the romance, as he puts it. And he did tours. He did shell tours, and he did ecological tours and plantation tours. So that's where I learned a lot about the Low Country. But that's also where I fell in love with the smell of pluff mud and everything about the Low Country. So in the second book, Lexi is brought to the Low Country, South Carolina for another undercover mission. And when she gets down here, she meets a crusty old sea captain, Captain Meade, who is, of course, obviously my Captain Sandy. And I love that character. He was probably my favorite character in the whole book because he was Sandy. And that's where the second book came from. It's just my love story to the Low Country. It's still a thriller, and I think it's quite a bit more exciting than Behind the Mask. I think the character development and the momentum is starting to build. I think each of the books get a little bit more exciting as they go along.
Well, I look forward to trying to squeeze it in, as Melissa says, when she's not reading one of our virtual book club books, because got to squeeze another one in. If other people that are listening, either now or later, is the best way to purchase that book on your website?
Well, actually, if you live locally, Nevermore Books and the Pat Conroy Center both carry the books if you live in the Beaufort area. Any independent bookstore can order it. Barnes & Noble usually carries it. Amazon, of course, has it in paperback, audiobook, and ebook forms. So it's out there in all three formats, if you want to listen to it or read, whatever. Amazon has all that. But any bookstore can order it, and I always encourage people to go to their local independent bookstores if they can, and buy locally if they can. But if it's easier to go to the big guys, then Amazon and Barnes & Noble both carry it as well.
A question that I had for you is, have you been out and about doing in-person events as an author?
Well, I started back when it looked like our numbers were down. I had actually got back out there and was started to do some live events again, but now our numbers are back up and they have slowly canceled again. So I'm very upset about that. I love meeting with people face to face. I love doing book clubs. I like sitting in people's living rooms and doing book clubs. And I like talking in front of big groups, and everything's kind of closed back down again.
I know. I need it to get in line by the beginning of next year, please. Yeah. So nothing affects our getaway. Shoshana did a comment here that she got the second 2 books from Amazon. So you hooked some of us in, and you've got me, like I said. Melissa and Dana, I was going to have each of you ask each other a question while we're waiting for our special guest, hopefully, to come up. And if anyone watching has any questions, please put them in the comments, and I'd be happy to facilitate it with our twosome here. So, Melissa, you ask Dana first.
Okay. So many questions. But the one I'm going to ask is, what is one fun fact about the book?
About the book?
Uh-huh.
The first book?
Got a jet flying over.
Yes. I live real close to the Marine Corps Air Base. It's the sound of freedom. Let's see, with the first book. Well, probably with all of the books, the FBI has to approve each of the books. So a lot of people don't realize that. But if I write a book and it has an FBI character or it touches the FBI in any way whatsoever, then the FBI has to approve it before I'm allowed to publish. It has to go through pre-publishing review. So, and that can take anywhere from 30 days to, 6 months.
That's good. Really That's interesting.
Yeah. Here comes another jet.
I missed that.
Yes.
And
so my turn.
Dana, do you have a question?
Yes.
Do you have a question for Melissa? Go for it.
Well, first of all, I loved your poetry. Everything, it just moved me so much. It was so beautiful. It was so beautifully written that I'm wondering, I know this came from a homework assignment, but are you writing poetry outside of the homework assignment? Are you working on things that, in addition to race in your class and stuff? Because you obviously have a beautiful talent. I mean, that couldn't have come just from the homework assignment.
Oh, thank you. I've written a couple outside, off topic, I guess I'll say. And I did share one at my most recent open mic. So it was a new one about an experience that I had back in 1980. So I really had to reach back. But again, it flowed pretty easily with a little massaging to get the rhyme in time. But yeah, so it's been exciting to, kind of have the other things come about in addition to, continuing to wrestle and process the topic of racism. So thanks.
Yeah, well, it was beautiful. I loved homework. I thought it was great.
Thank you. Feeling very vulnerable after putting it all out there for sure. But
I can understand why. I really can. But you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
I've been setting up shuttle service from Savannah Airport over to Beaufort or to Ladies Island. And I had the most remarkable conversation with my shuttle driver. And what was interesting is his name was AC. And I was like, well, what does AC stand for? And he said Cutbirth. And I went, and he goes, yeah, that was the Cutbirth Inn were the slave masters of his family. And
wow.
So I just was asking all kinds of questions, and we had one of the best conversations I've had, a biracial conversation, since a lot of processing that we've all gone through, I think, over the last year and a half. And he was dynamic. We talked about the Gullah culture. We talked about how important it is for us to learn, but then it also seems to be getting a little commercialized and things like that. So it just was an intriguing conversation. So I look forward to my next shuttle ride with him so I can continue the conversation. I have a couple of comments. Joyce Wright said to Melissa, I love your passion. And she also said, love the poem to Robert Smalls, especially after having read Trouble of Water by Rebecca. And that's fantastic.
Yes.
I wanted to ask each of you a question about writing. And did you ever have self-doubt before you put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard? And if so, how did you get beyond that? Was it inspiration from someone else? Was it your own self-talk? Was it just, oh, what the heck, I'm just going to do it and see what happens? Tell me a little bit about how you convinced yourself that it was okay to write. And I'll have Dana go first.
Well, with me, I started out writing behind the mask for my mother. I never really thought about that it was going to be a novel and that there would be more than my mother reading it. She had always wanted me to write. And when I found the journals, I thought, well, I'll write a book and I'll write it for my mom. But I had just kind of intended it for her eyes only. And then throughout the process, other people had read it in manuscript form and said, oh no, this has got to be published. You've got to get this out there. So when it was in manuscript form, I hadn't let anybody read it, though, at that point. And there was a contest. It was Southeastern Writers, as a matter of fact, was having a contest. And I submitted this unpublished manuscript into this novel competition. And I didn't tell anybody I did it. I was the person sitting in the corner, just kind of hiding. Didn't expect to win. So when they called my name, I just sat there like a lump on a pickle. Because, I couldn't believe that I had won an award for this. But to be honest with you, I think that's what did it. I mean, just somebody saying, this is good, you need to get it out there. That one little tiny contest that I won all those years ago started the ball rolling. And at that point, I guess I didn't look back. I thought, okay. And then once the first one was out there, I said, well, we'll see if it's a one-hit wonder or if I got more in me.
That's a wonderful story. I love that. What about you, Melissa?
So again, this was my homework assignments to talk about with my, intimate group of, folks that are going on this same journey with me. But then sharing it with one of my mentors, Patty, and with my husband, within 2 weeks of each other, they said, you've got to do something with this. And I was like, what? So then I was compelled to figure it out. And I'm a virtual assistant by trade. And wanting some of the proceeds to go to the Harriet Tubman Monument, I wanted to keep my overhead low. So doing a lot of this self-publishing myself so that I could, give the money away as much as possible. That's how it kind of came about. And then the open mic element of sharing kind of came about with Juneteenth when that became an official holiday, one of the local poetry groups had a Juneteenth special event, and I was like, okay, I'm there, so I'm going to share, and that's how that came about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for answering that question. It's interesting because it's always a different answer for authors or poets, what have you want to ask. So speaking of other authors, Dana, I have a friend that's in the waiting room, and I was wondering if you would be happy to, drum roll, introduce our surprise guest of our meeting. And as you get close to wrapping up, I'll bring them on live. So
sure.
Who are you referring us to?
I would love to. As I said before, I now live in Beaufort, and Beaufort has a wonderful group of authors that live here, local authors. And I met John through some of the stuff, I guess, at the Pat Conroy Literary Center, which I think the Pat Conroy Literary Center joins us all. So I met John, and he is a wonderful author. He's a great speaker, and he's an all-around great human being. So you guys are in for such a treat. I understand you're probably going to be reading his book in about March, but he's just a wonderful author. And I think you're going to be reading A Southern Girl. So you're in for a huge treat. But I'll let John come on and talk about himself.
Hi,
oh,
John,
Dana.
welcome.
Oh, no, I can't possibly talk about myself. Really, no.
Hi, John. I'm Susie, and next to you on the Brady Bunch screen is Melissa. And Dana, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm to the south of you, down on Fripp Island.
Oh, you're just at Fripp. You're right. You're right over the bridge.
It's getting dark.
Yes, it is.
So, John, I know that another friend of mine, Donna, has talked to you behind the scenes, and you agreed to be a participant in the Low Country Literary and Leisure Getaway in March of 2022, doing the author panel Friends of Pat Conroy, and I want to thank you for that. But with no further ado, if it's okay with you, I'd love for my virtual book club to read A Southern Girl in March. At the same time, we'll be able to meet you, some of those people coming. If we could read that book, and I look forward to hearing a little backstory from you about that, or a little bit about yourself. And I'm going to give you the floor, John. Welcome.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Susie. It's a pleasure to be with you. And Dana, thank you so much for this opportunity. And Melissa, nice to meet you virtually as well. To begin at the beginning, I am a native South Carolinian. I was born in Florence. I grew up in Charleston for 10 years before we moved to Virginia. I went to public school in Virginia, got a football scholarship to the Citadel, came down and spent 4 years in Charleston, got a law degree from the University of Virginia, and practiced law for many years before I got sidetracked and then gobsmacked by the whole writing business. I started doing it in my middle 40s, kind of as a hobby. And then, as writing will do, it took over my life. And I retired from law on one of the happiest days of my life. They always talk about how the birth of your children's a happy day. The day you get married is a happy day. Well, there's a happy day when you stop practicing law. And now I've been retired so long that the statute of limitations is run on any claim any client may have had for anything I've messed up. So that's a relief too. But anyway, I did, when I started the writing in my mid 40s, it really perilously came close to taking over my life, because I got so intently interested in it. And I got so interested in it that after writing my first novel, which I was not sure was any good at all, and there was only one person that I knew personally who could tell me if it was any good, and that was my college classmate in good buddy, Pat Conroy. And, you know, if you've only got one person to go to, Pat wasn't a bad one to have. You know, he'd been on a basketball scholarship at the Citadel, and as I had mentioned, I was on a football scholarship, so we played different sports. But in the spring, we played baseball to get off the campus to meet women. We were both honest about that. You know, that's what we wanted to do. We liked baseball, but we really liked women, and we wanted to meet some. And the Citadel had, if you remember, back in 1967, it was a very easy number to remember how many women were in the Citadel at the time. And in fact, in 1967, you know how many people there were at the College of Charleston? About 450 people in the College of Charleston. And even though 70% of those were women, I never met a single co-ed in the College of Charleston in my whole 4 years. And think of what a different place Charleston is today with the footprint of the College of Charleston there. Anyway, I digress. I sent this novel to Pat. He was living in San Francisco at the time. He'd just come back from Italy writing beach music. And I sent it to him, and in typical Conroy fashion, he said, "John, there's something wrong with my phone. For just a moment, I thought you said you wrote a novel." And I said, "Well, Pat, I did." He said, "You never read a book at the Citadel. How is that possible?" And I said, "Well, you know, that's not true, Pat. It's just that I was more of a nonfiction fan while you were doing your Thomas Wolfe worship. I heard more about Thomas Wolfe and Look Homeward Angel than I ever wanted to. I finally had to read the book just to be able to talk about it. But anyway, so I Pat said, please send me the manuscript. I sent it to him. He called me a couple of weeks later. He said, I think you got something here. I'm going to forward it on to my agent in New York. And that was encouraging because Pat really had one of the top literary agents in New York, a guy named Julian Bach. And Julian called me and said, I love the book. I want to represent it. He said, not only do I think it's going to be a major trade publication, but I also think it's going to be a film. Well, I mean, you know, this is pretty good. I mean, that's my first book, and already they're talking about a movie. So, and Julian says, now I have one word of caution. I haven't taken on a political book, and it was a political thriller type book. He said, I haven't taken on a political book in 5 years because I have found political books difficult to sell. Now, I wouldn't take yours on if I didn't think I could sell it, but I just that word of caution. Well, of course, by the time he said that, I was already casting the movie. I'd already spent the royalties that this book was going to generate. I wasn't paying the first bit of attention to this little caveat Julian threw it in at the end. So that proved prophetic. It came near miss at the major houses, and at the end of the day, it didn't sell. So I said, okay, Julian, what do I do now? He said, throw it in a drawer and write another one. I said, okay. Well, I wrote the first one between 4 a.m. and 7:30 in the morning with a full law practice and 4 kids. I couldn't do that again. So my wife and I decided to do what I think any reasonable person would have done under those circumstances. We sold our house and moved to Mexico for 2 years to central Mexico, where I wrote A Southern Girl. And so that was between 1993 and 1995. That book sat in a drawer for 14 or 15 years until I made a presentation at the Savannah Book Festival in 2012 with Pat. Pat insisted that I be with him when he appeared. And we had a joint presentation to a packed house in Savannah. I assumed they were there for me. Maybe some of them had come for Pat. He was developing a name. But the two of us made a presentation, and in the audience that day was Jonathan Haupt, who we all know now as the director of the Pat Conroy Literary Center. But at the time, Jonathan was the executive director of the University of South Carolina Press. So he said, he emailed me the following day. He said, I was in the audience yesterday when you and Pat gave your talks. I liked what I heard. Would you come to the South Carolina Book Festival? I said, sure. So one thing led to another, and I submitted this manuscript to him that had been under a drawer for 14 or 15 years. He kept it a few weeks and called me and said, we'd really like to publish this. So that became A Southern Girl. It came out, the book came out in May of 2014. It is, as the current director of the University of South Carolina Press reminded me the other day, the best-selling novel they have had at the University of South Carolina Press, and is still selling, which pleases me immensely because it's been out now, 7 years? And so I've done a lot of talks on it. It seems to resonate with people. It's, of course, a story of adoption. To give you my elevator speech about the book, it's the story of the adoption of a Korean orphan into a very conservative Southern family that was not interested in having any Asians in the family tree. And it's semi-autobiographical. I have 3 biological sons and 1 adopted Korean daughter, who was kind of the motivation for the book. So I am delighted to hear that your book club may be taking it up. I hope people enjoy it. I'd love to come back and answer any questions that people have about it. Anything I can do to help would be great.
Well, thank you so much, John. I really appreciate your story. Lots of giggles and lots of wonderful connections. I love how everybody in this room can connect to Jonathan. That's fantastic. In this room,
Jonathan is a force of nature. He really is.
Yes, he is. Well, I was wondering, I'm going to put Melissa and Dana on the spot because I'm good at that, and see if the two of you have a single question for John, and then we'll wrap up in just a couple of minutes because we're almost 40 minutes in. But if it's okay with you, John, I've got you on the calendar for March of 2022, and I'll talk to you about the best way for everyone to order your book. And then we would love to have you come back in April to have a chat like this and maybe refer us to another author you may know locally or non-locally, whatever works for you.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you for participating. Hey, Dana, what do you want to ask John?
Well, since you're, done with the whole law practice thing, you and I are both former attorneys that we don't talk about that stuff anymore.
Feels pretty good to get away from it, doesn't it?
It was the greatest day of my life too. But what are you working on now? Are you working on a new novel, or what do you have in the works?
A couple of years ago, I put out a historical fiction called The Home Guard. And while I am working on a sequel to that, I'm about 25% of the way through it. I have been sidetracked by 2 books that I have presented to a publisher and am waiting for a contract from them for these 2 books that will really probably take up my next 3 to 4 years. So it's not signed yet, it's never a done deal until the ink's on the contract, but one of them is a biography and the other is a kind of a current event story. So I don't seem to be able to find a genre that likes me or that I stick with, because now I think I have a political thriller fiction. I have 2 books on social satire. I have a family history story. I have historical fiction. Now I'm writing a biography and then a current events. So a literary agent or a publisher would tell you, this is not the way to make money in the publishing business. But fortunately, I never went into it for the money in the first place. And the money I've successfully avoided money since I've been doing it. So, that's fine. It's all about the work. It's all about the work. Well, thank you for the question, Dana.
John, so nice to meet you. And my question is, what book or books are on your nightstand right now?
Well, I just came from a book club meeting. I am a member of a book club that actually met face to face. This was my first meeting with this book club. It's a couples book club. So Marilyn Harcharik, as you all may know Marilyn, she lives just on the other side of the hall from me. Her studio is on the other side of the hall from mine. And Marilyn and I are members of this couples book club, and we just talked about the first book on the agenda, which was Cast, by Isabel Wilkerson, which is a pretty phenomenal book. And if the rest of the books on the list or anything like this one, this will be a very stimulating club to be part of. So I just finished that. I proposed a book for the club that'll be taken up in the spring called Nutshell by Ian McEwan, which is a novel which I think is one of the most creative things I have read in years. And so that's very high on my list. And then I have a stack of Irish history on my bookshelf, because that's the background for one of these two books I mentioned that I'm apparently going to be writing shortly. So I have lots and lots of books, as I know you do, Melissa.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that answer.
Yeah.
John, do you have any questions for Dana, Melissa, or myself?
How long well, first of all, how are the Red Sox going to do in the pennant race? That would be my first question.
I can't answer.
No answer?
If you're talking about
Dana?
SEC football, I can talk, but.
Okay.
I can talk about Kentucky basketball.
And the Ravens lost last night, so.
Oh, did they? I hadn't even seen that score yet. Oh. Well, no. I'm just anxious to get back in front of people in a face-to-face setting to talk about this. So many things got canceled when COVID came along. I know you all were as affected as I was by it, and we just need to get out of this hole we're in to get back nose to nose and have a glass of wine together.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Yes, cheers to that.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, I just want to thank Dana, Melissa, and John, all three of you, for joining tonight for our virtual book club that did start in April of 2020 with Rebecca Dwight-Bruff as my first author. And the
great
whole format
selection.
has gone. Yeah, she helped me kick this off with the fact that we feature an author once a month, and then that author refers us to another month. So far, it just continues to grow, and I have thoroughly enjoyed making friends with so many of you, and I look forward to meeting you in person, John. Kathleen Harvey is a name that three of you might recognize, and she says fantastic in the comments. And I just want to sign off, say to everyone, our next book next month is Alone in Wonderland, and this is written by a young author, debut novelist. Her name is Christine Reed, and she contacted me in my other home in Colorado. And it is a story about her hiking in the Northwest. And I've only read the prologue, and I'm so excited. Has a little bit of a flair of Wild that was written, that big blockbuster that was written recently. But I will I'll put the notes in our Facebook page and let you know who the next book is and so on and so on. And I just want to say cheers to all three of you. Thanks for joining me tonight. And say good night. I'll start with Dana at the first corner. Dana is right there. And then John and Melissa can all do your closing words. You have the floor, Dana.
All right. Well, good night, everybody. And thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, I'm on probably every kind of social media there is. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it, I'm there. So just drop me a line. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions. And I hope you enjoyed the book, and go out and grab the second book now.
Awesome. So likewise, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed being the wing woman for the night. And feel free to connect with me on social media if you have any questions, or offline if you'd like to have a conversation.
And John, you get the last word.
Yes. Again, I've enjoyed being here, certainly meeting you guys. And Dana, I'll see you at Docktails one of these days. Yeah. And Susie and Melissa, you guys come to Docktails too. It's pretty sweet. So with that, adios.
Adios, everybody. Everybody have a great night and happy reading.